Right, good evening, lads. How are we all doing?
My dogs just started barking. My dogs just started barking as soon as we started recording.
Couldn't write it, mate. Yeah, mate. I'm all good. To be fair, it was one of those days. I had a long old day, to be honest with you. And I was like, at one point, I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to come on and like perform, but I'm good to go.
No, just a chat. Yeah, good to see you both. So, for everyone watching today, we've got George Hobbs from Oddballs and Rugby, and we've got Tom Matthews, who's the coordinator for Movember at Cardiff University. So, thank you both for coming on with me and Jared today, lads. We really appreciate it. So first thing, I just wanted to, George, we'll chat to you first, and then Tom, we're just sort of wondering how you're currently finding lockdown and how this has specifically affected your rugby experience and what's this meant for you.
Yeah, mate. Well, it's a weird one, isn't it? Honestly, like we were just thinking today, I live in a house full of rugby boys, but got a bit of an interesting dynamic where we're all not like, we were all sort of social players. None of us are like top boys in the rugby club or anything. So obviously with that, I'm sure it is with football as well. You sort of fall into like social groups within your big club. Do you know what I mean? So usually when rugby's on, you're engaging with all these other groups. And like we're sitting in our garden today just talking about how we haven't seen a lot of the boys that we usually see. So in that regard, like it's been quite tough not being able to like just bump into all of the boys that are obviously your mates, but with this lockdown, it's just been pretty difficult to like maintain those relationships, because obviously on your phone, I don't know how you boys have found it, but I'm rubbish on my phone, and there are certain boys that like I would love to talk to, but I probably wouldn't text, if that makes sense. You just like see them in the clubhouse on a Wednesday. So yeah, lockdown's been tough in that regard. In terms of like not actually being able to play rugby, I reckon like that's probably been one that hasn't affected me as much, because like I do a lot of other fitness and stuff. But in terms of just like mixing it with the boys, like as I say, like there's a different dynamic in there. Like when you're actually training, like, obviously I'm sure it's the same with football, but there's just like that sort of thing. So yeah, mate, it's been my phone.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't want to delve too deep at the start from the intros, but I just think you've raised a really good point that you wouldn't text a lot of boys, but you would have like a nice conversation with them maybe on a Wednesday or something. How do you think this has affected sort of boys today, like all men across all sports? Do you think that's quite a big issue, and sort of is this something that sort of mentally is quite tough on sort of sports players, even though they're not specifically playing sports, being part of a club?
Yeah, mate, I think there's a really interesting thing. You just like that idea that you'll feel obliged to text people because you usually see them. But actually, I think when there's that natural sort of, I feel like there's too much pressure put on to text people to keep in touch with them, when actually sometimes you don't necessarily have to, and then you can catch up with them in certain situations and it just like flows again. And I think like there is too much of a social stigma on, obviously now everyone wants to talk to each other, don't they? It's like you got to check up on your mates, and that actually I think builds up as a bit of pressure. And so I think that's why it's so, like this time particularly is so difficult, because you're not just being able to bump into them. So like, I don't know if you boys have walked past anyone in Cardiff recently and seen some, and usually you just be like, oh, Sound, how you doing? But you're like chatting with them for ages, can need to catch up and do all that. So hopefully like when we get back to like just being able to catch up with everyone, it will sort of just like become easy again.
I've forgotten how to talk to people as well. Like I had it when I was in Beauty Park, and I saw one of the lads I lived with in first year, and you'd have thought we'd never met each other. Like the conversation, well, I was with some other people and he was with some other people, and we literally just stood there and looked at each other for like 5 minutes and just grunted essentially, because it was so like awkward, and I just forgotten how to talk to him.
Yeah. Mate, I had that the other day as well. I was sitting in Butte Park, and like you're with your group, and then you see someone, their group comes over, and they have to like, if your group doesn't know their group, they just stand there awkwardly whilst you like try and chat to each other, and then you're like, Sound, that was good. See you later.
You know, when you're walking past someone, like, you're right, mate, you're right. How are you? You're like, oh, I didn't commit to this, but yeah, I'm good. Like you, like you just
mate. Then you got like an all right or something. You're like, you're right, and then they actually reply with an answer, and you're like, oh, mate, I was kind of just saying how you do. Oh, wow, hello.
Ben, you've got halfway through an intro there. Tom, bless him, is just sat there going, will someone introduce me, please?
Sorry. Apologies.
Just sat there.
That's the beauty of the podcast, that is. Sorry, so yeah, thank you for that, George. Tom, moving on to you, just sort of how I know you mentioned before the call that you were still at home. How have you sort of found things, just in general, and then sort of mentally, sort of obviously, I'm guessing you haven't had too much interaction with boys as much as we have, sort of living with lots of our friends. So how have you just found this sort of time?
It's been all right. I've sort of just tried to keep to a routine. Like I sort of did what everyone else did in the first lockdown, and we'd wake up at 2, eat, do school all day, go to bed at like stupid o'clock, and do the same thing every day. And then this one, I was like, I might as well do something. So I'd been smashing the home gym, eating, and then just doing uni work, and sort of got into a routine of doing the same thing every day. But I'm sort of content with it now, because there is light at the end of the tunnel. It feels like things are going to get better with the vaccine and all that. Whereas at the start, it was like, is this ever going to end? So like mentally, I'm all right. If I do feel like talk to my parents or I talk to my mates about it, but I've not really been that bad because it's just one of them things now, and it's become a life rather than everything's taken away from me. This is the new reality of it.
No, definitely. And this is just an interesting thing I've just thought of, that both of you, George and Tom, are like the face of big campaigns to do with men's health and men's mental health. Do you almost feel sort of responsible, or like you almost have to be the face of sort of talking to people, like you have to be actively doing those things to encourage people? Do you almost feel that sort of pressure to sort of actively be the face of these campaigns, not just sort of be the guy who's telling people what to do? If Tom, do you want to just give me
I definitely did within the month of like November. Like I'm not like I was doing my own sort of challenge where I was meant to be running loads, but I'm 6'6", so I couldn't really run. My knees would just give in, so I was doing cycling instead, and I was absolutely like every day I was just knackered, and I still had to sort of keep this, not like a persona as much, but I had to sort of be positive. And if I was feeling, say I felt, but I didn't want everyone to be like, well, he's meant to be the top dog of this, and he feels like he can't even do it. Why should I be able to do it? So like, there was definitely a pressure on my shoulder for the build up and throughout the month. But I feel like sort of talking to other people, because trying to push it off like my shoulders to other people and give other people responsibility to talk about the campaign and stuff like that, sort of took the weight off my shoulders as well.
No, definitely. And George, have you got any?
It's really interesting that you say that, just because, like for me, it's sort of the opposite. It's like the opposite of the pressure, and actually, I feel like I am inspired to be how I'm trying to not get other people to be like, but like with, for example, testicular cancer, it's an awkward topic. Like there is that taboo that surrounds it, and I had a bit of an experience actually. And I'm happy to talk about it almost because of my role, where I had like a bit of a testicular cancer scare, and I was like, oh, I've got to get my nuts checked up, and I was like, this is so awkward. And I didn't, and I do a lot of like school talks and stuff, and I kind of felt like, do I want to talk about this? But then I remembered, if I'm the guy who's trying to get other people to talk, I need to talk. And actually, so it almost now drives me forward into like whenever I'm in an awkward situation. Like, for example, like Tom, I know you obviously talking a lot about trying to get your dad to like check himself, like for prostate and stuff like that. Like having that conversation with my dad, that's an awkward conversation to have. But like, I'm sort of forcing myself to do it, because if I can't do it, then like, what right do I have to tell someone else? Do you know what I mean?
Oh, definitely.
I had a nightmare with it in November, because I was doing all the posts like on my own socials every day about checking up on your mates, checking your balls, make sure your dad's having his prostate checks. And the one day I'd wrote like, oh, check up on your mates, check your balls, and then check your dad's prostate. And I left it up for about 2 hours, and I was like, oh, like one of my mates messaged me like, why have you done this? And I was like, oh, like all of my like credibility had just gone out the window, because I've been telling you to think of your dad's mum. Do you know what I mean? It was awful. I was like, I thought I'm an absolute fraud.
That's so deep, mate. That's just commitment. I love that. You're leading the way, mate.
It was awful.
Just Jared, I just wanted sort of along the same question. Obviously, you're the vice president of football and the captain of the development squad, so you're the face for a lot of freshers. Especially a lot of freshers go into that squad, and a lot of boys that are really trying to get better. Do you sort of the same question? Like, do you feel a lot of pressure? I've never thought about it. But you know, when I sort of made you the role of vice president, I just thought, you're the perfect man for the job. I didn't actually think about the mental toll it might take on you. And do you sort of feel a mental toll, responsibility, and sort of toughness to be the face for a lot of those boys?
I think it was a pretty much a role I just fell into. So not really. I haven't really stopped and thought about it that much. It's kind of just been a bit of take the odd training here and there. And with Movember, actually, Tom, I was going to ask you about it, because I coordinated the football club's Movember. Mate, how did you coordinate it for the whole of the uni? coordinate even the football club was the longest thing I've ever done in my entire life. All boys needed to do was literally, it was a 2-minute form online. That's it. It literally took like 5 days to get everyone to do it. It was a joke, mate. How did you get so many blokes to do it throughout the uni? I've got no idea.
It was a lot of like, just, I started really early because I know what it's like. Like, you get an email and you think, well, what does he want? And it's very much, I was trying to talk to people like I was just mates with them, rather than, oh, hi, I'm an ambassador for this charity, can you help us? Rather than that, I was trying to get it to like, can you just join in with this, mate? Because we need you to. It's such a good cause. And it sort of brushed it off my shoulders onto people like you, like, oh, Jared, can you do this for me? And then it's not my responsibility then. I just sort of oversee everyone who needs the help. So I push it onto all the charity sectors and stuff like that at different societies. And it wasn't that bad, because once the month starts, it's like, bang, you're into it. I was just giving some people like ideas and stuff like that, because with it was the fire break in Wales, so everyone was thinking, oh, well, I planned this, but I can't do this. And it was a very difficult thing. Like, I've got a bike here in my room because I couldn't do what I wanted to do because of the fire break and stuff like that. And it was just sort of pushing it from my shoulders, because it seems like a massive responsibility, but I just sort of gave it to everyone else, really, and then just oversaw it, like, just took a hands-off role.
But also, like, I find interestingly, like, I reached out to you because I saw what you were doing, and I remember being like, that's so sick. Obviously, we're all like, what we're doing right now is like getting around men in general, and I think I've got like a serious passion for like making, obviously at the moment, like, obviously it's really tense, like surrounding some of the stuff that men potentially do, you know, especially surrounding like, you know, this whole like sexual assault stuff, and like obviously we need to like support that, but we can't lose sight of the fact that as men we need to also have our own sort of team where we're looking out for one another, because, you know, something like Movember massively like puts onus on looking after like our mental health, and that is something like we need to do. So when I saw you doing your thing, I was like, I need to jump on that, and I need to do something with you right now, because that snowballed. And I don't know about you boys, but like, I mean, Matthew, mate, your posts were getting so many like likes and comments and people going, yes, go for it. So like, almost, I felt like the uni got behind it so hard.
I felt like it wasn't me just doing like a charity post. I felt like it was, oh, our mate Matthews is doing this, let's just like this. And I felt like I was talking to people, like even like alumni that are on the Overheard page and stuff like that, were messaging me like, this is great, mate. Like, it's nice to see that even though I graduated 8 years ago or whatever, it was some bloke messaged me about it. He was like, it's still great to see things like this are going on. And I felt like, especially with the pandemic, the whole thing sort of like exploded, because like we had like a talk, like a course thing before, like a training thing. And I remember asking the main woman at Movember about whether they were expecting to make less because of the pandemic, and they were. She told me they were, but literally the numbers, the amount of people getting involved, the money raised, it all sort of skyrocketed. Like last year we only raised 23 grand, and then this year we raised 66, and it was just like, I feel like everyone, because of the pandemic, like maybe before the pandemic they hadn't really experienced mental health issues or didn't know if they were, and then because it was such a massive change for everyone, people were feeling like, they were like, actually, this is such a good thing and we all need to get involved with it.
Mm-hmm.
No, definitely.
Fair play, mate. Fair play.
Yeah. Thank you both of you for your things. Since we've touched them, I thought we might as we'll delve straight into it. I was wondering, George, if you could just talk about Oddballs, sort of what it is, why it's important, and sort of what was your motivation for being sort of the face of it, and sort of why you're sort of here today.
Mate, do you know what? It's a really interesting story. Obviously, like growing up around rugby and sport in general, I suppose Oddballs have got a massive affiliation with that. So I've grown up with Oddballs my whole life. It's just always been something there. And then as it moved through the uni, like there's been like Oddballs Sec in the rugby club for a few years now, because they started in 2015 and they've had ambassadors from 2017. And so it's sort of like the natural succession came through the rugby club. And I was really interested in the role. Obviously, like you see the car you drive and stuff, and there's a lot that goes with it in terms of like, it's a cool thing to do. So that was my initial sort of draw. I was like, oh, that's really cool. But as I've got involved with it now, like the whole ethos of Oddballs is, you know, like it's smile, family, quality, cause. But that cause at the bottom is like what underpins all of it and what motivates me to do it, I suppose. Like it really does. Like, but I feel like, to be perfectly honest with you, I fell into that, because when you go out to schools and chatting to people about testicular cancer and like seeing them become comfortable with it, is actually like a really awesome thing. So like what inspired me to do it, probably just like getting around a cool car and stuff, but why I'm here now is massively for the cause, to be honest. But I think that's an honest, I feel, you know, gotta be honest with it all. But yeah.
No, definitely. No. We really appreciate all your work. And I was just wondering on testicular cancer, obviously this could affect myself, Jared, both of you. So do you know sort of the things we should look out for? What do we need to go?
Yeah.
When should we get tested? Sort of what sort of the protocol we should take to be safe?
Yeah, right. So what's really important with testicular cancer, and in terms of like being able to spot what you're looking for, is like familiarizing yourself with your own balls now. Like it's one of those ones where we're called odd balls for a reason, because everyone's got different shaped balls. So you can't like confer with someone and be like, what are you saying, mate? Because what you might have is different to someone else. So important to like check yourself, make sure you know what you're feeling like. And then basically you're looking out for lumps, bumps, anything like swelling, painless swelling. But also with that being said, so basically any kind of physical deformity on your testicle, take yourself off to the doctor pretty much as soon as possible. But with that being said, like I spoke about the experience I had the other day, and that's that I just had like a sharp pain in one of my testicles, and that's like just one of the symptoms you could be looking out for. So we spoke to a guy when I first joined the foundation who had testicular cancer, and he actually just said, "Do you know what, mate? I just felt like something wasn't right." So it's one of those ones where you know what your balls feel like, but if anything's off, take yourself up to the doctor, because like what else I would add on top of that as well is when I went to get checked up, it is nowhere near as awkward as you think it's going to be. Like it really isn't. They call you up and they say, "Do you want a boy or a girl to do your examination?" And you can just pick and you go in, and it's all easy, mate. And then they'll be able to tell you from there. So yeah, just keep checking is the real message.
Yeah,
George, can I ask what the like, you know, when you went and you had obviously you had the check done.
Yeah.
What's the protocol there? So how do they go about doing that? This was a bit of an awkward question, but
no, mate, that's fine. So when it happened with me, I obviously, because I didn't have any like physical symptoms, I was like feeling my balls and like there's no lumps there, and I think that's the big scare, in it. Like you finding a lump and you're like, Jesus, like that's the one you always, because of my symptom was a bit like different. I called up the doctor and I explained what I had, and I got a call back the same day, because I think when it comes to that kind of stuff, they're pretty like quick on it. And she just said, "Just come in. Are you happy for me to do the checkup?" I said, "Yeah, that sounds." So she's like, "Right, well, you can come in today then, because I'm happy to do it." You go to the doctor. Obviously, COVID at the moment, you sort of have to wait outside. So it's one of those ones I was like waiting outside. And like, I mean, look, I'll throw out on the table.
Up, didn't you? I bet you shriveled up.
Mate, well, this is literally, I'm about to sort of come out with this form of admission. I'm sitting there going, Jesus, this is not good for what's about to happen. So you're obviously, but then obviously you remember like this is a medical professional, and actually like there's no reason to feel awkward at all. So you go in, and then it's pretty much the way you check yourself. The way you check yourself normally is you get your thumb and your forefinger, and you roll each testicle between, and you see if you can feel any lumps or bumps, etc. But then when you go to the doctor, they do the exact same thing to you. You just drop your kegs, jump up on the side, and they do that. And it takes, I reckon, about 30 seconds probably. But what is pretty important that we always say as well is like to be honest with them, because then she couldn't feel anything. She said, "Look, I can't feel anything. What can you tell me about your symptoms?" And you just describe to them what you're thinking and what you're feeling, sorry. And then from there with me, obviously, because it wasn't a symptom that she could have felt, she had to send me off for a CT scan, not a CT scan, sorry, a ultrasound, and then from there, that's how that happened. So it's really like the stigma that surrounds it is just not as big as it should be.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thank you for sharing that, George. So Tom, just sort of same question. Sort of just want to know sort of why Movember is so important. It's something that me and Jared both got involved in with the football club. And sort of what were your motivations for sort of being the face of it at, you know, such a big university? It's quite a big task, obviously, to take. I'm just sort of interested in what your thoughts were going into sort of that month of November.
Looks as though you've kept your motivation as well, mate. Kept your time.
No, I've just got lazy. So I started doing it when I was in upper sixth at school, because I wasn't actually allowed like facial hair. And then if you did Movember, you were. And I only raised like 150 quid, which wasn't that bad, because I wasn't really that dedicated to it. I just did like a weekly update. And then first year at uni, because I know I have like friends who've lost family members to suicide and other issues like the prostate and the testicular cancer, and I thought, I might as well get involved, because it's a laugh, and I think that's what a lot of people do. It is quite funny because I look awful and stuff like that. So I did it as a laugh, and I raised like £1,000, and I thought I'd apply for the student ambassador thing, and I didn't actually get it. And then Tobias, one of the lads that George knows, actually got it, but he was going to do a master's somewhere else. So they gave it to me after a couple of weeks later, and at the point I was a bit like, oh, all right then. So then I took that up, but I got that in like May, and then the day before I moved back to university for second year, one of my friends who was at Met took his own life, and his name was Haas, and like he was part of the rugby team there, and I sort of knew him through rugby when I was growing up. I knew of him, and then I met him in prison in Freshers, and it was just like we were best mates again. And I spoke to him quite a lot over the lockdown. I even spoke to him on the day that he passed away. So it sort of really brought it to home for me, and I was like, I've got such a massive position of influence here. Like I can make a change. Like we need to do that. I don't want anyone else to feel like I felt or just feel any way like that, because it is awful, and it's something that is tough to deal with, because I mean death is part of life, and everyone has to understand that. But Movember tries to make men's lives as long and as happy as they can be, and prevent these sort of things happening, because it's sort of the pain of the suicide just passes on to another person, and it sort of just carries on, which I think why it's so important, the charity and what it's aiming to do to try and cut the suicide rates and make men get checked for these cancers and live happy after they've had the cancers as well. And that's why I just think it's so important.
Definitely, yeah. I'm really sorry to hear about that, Tom, but thank you for sharing that with us. And I just was sort of interested on the Movember. Why do they choose to grow a moustache? Like, what's sort of the point of seeing lads grow moustaches?
So the charity was founded. There was the two Aussie blokes in a pub, and they were like looking at trends of stuff that was like that had gone out of fashion, like from the 80s, like the massive hair and stuff. And then they saw like moustaches, and they thought, oh, that's quite funny. So they grew a moustache for a month, and it was just like, oh, all right. And then they took inspiration from like the breast cancer awareness movement, like all the pink stuff and stuff like that. And they thought, oh, that's quite interesting. So they were raising money initially for prostate cancer, because one of them saw an ad on, like, you know, you get the telly at like 2 o'clock in the morning where they're trying to sell you like something that wipes your own arse for you on like telecom or whatever it is. They saw an ad on there for prostate cancer, and then they realized that prostate cancer is essentially the same sort of numbers for men as breast cancer is for women. And they thought, well, I didn't have a clue about it, and I think a lot of people don't. So they initially started with it being like the prostate side of it. They'd grow the moustache for the prostate cancer, but then they noticed all the different issues like the testicular cancer and the suicide prevention and stuff like that. And because it all comes into the men's, and it's what was really affecting men, and it's all about changing the face of men's health, which is why you grow the moustache.
Nice. That's a good catchline. That it's sort of as well, just like sort of to jump on like that a little bit, because that's where I feel like Movember and Oddballs are really, really similar. Is that obviously Movember, the moustache, and then for Oddballs, the bright colours and the pants and like all the new stuff they're coming out with now. It's like a vehicle for us as men to be able to say, without having to say it, listen, lads, like we're here, we're on your team, we're like committed to breaking down these stigmas. So when you see a lad with a moustache, like I was always like, every lad I saw in Movember with a moustache, I was like, what a legend. Like they're literally growing something on their face to say to all the other boys, like, we're with you. I just think that's so sick. I just think that's awesome.
It's really powerful. It just starts conversations. Like when I did it in first year, I had this like Tom Curry mullet where it was like that. And I just looked like a knobhead, really. But like you'd go out and then people would be like, oh, are you doing that for Movember? You'd be like, yeah. And then you just have a conversation with someone you probably wouldn't have had a conversation with before. They probably would just gone, look at him, he looks like a lighthouse. Do you know what I mean? It just gets people talking, and you start talking about different things.
No, definitely. No. Yeah, no. I think it's great, and I just wanted, Jared. Obviously, you just coordinated it for football, sort of, and obviously you just came to me with that, sort of, without any sort of push or anything. What was your motivation for doing that?
Well, to be fair, mate, I just thought it's something. It's so easy to do. Realistically, to grow a tash is so easy to do, and as you were saying, Tom, it's so powerful. And as we were talking about the other week, Ben, about in football, kind of the fact that none of us, I think probably not just even in football, in team sports, really, none of us have those conversations. I mean, we had the first podcast, as we said, we were saying we never really had any particular conversations about mental health or anything around that. And I just kind of thought, if we can get the football club to do that, the whole, because, well, it was probably 85% then, did it? Probably more than that, of the whole club. It's so powerful to go to training and every single bloke have something in common as well, because at that time, we weren't, obviously, we were literally just training. That was it. That was all we had. And for first year boys especially, they don't know many blokes. You don't have a lot in common. Bar playing football, you don't have those memories that you might have with other years. So the fact that we could all just come to training and all have, I mean, towards the end of November, trainings looked absolutely horrendous. There were just blokes all over the place with the worst moustaches you've ever seen. But it gave everyone something to laugh about and something to talk about, really. And it gave you, like, blokes in third year having conversations with boys in first year about, like, I don't know, how's your tash going? Gives that something for them to talk about, and then potentially from that, other boys chatting us about more important stuff as well. So that was my motivation, really. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. So thank you all three of you for sort of being so vocal and the face of all these movements. It's also obviously influenced a lot of people, including myself, to sort of the reason why we started this podcast, really, wasn't it, Jared? We sort of got an email from the AU and thought, oh, you know, this is something that we can actually influence. We know an all right amount of people, and I'm sure we'll be able to get people like Tom and George on, which then influences more and more and more. And we just think that it's just going, it's sort of sending the sort of trying to reduce the stigma about all these sort of issues that we have.
Personally, Ben, like, I saw Tom and George's the Zoom calls you were doing. I don't know how long ago it was when you two were doing those.
November, wasn't it? We did for November, yeah.
And it was stuff like that. We spoke about that at football as well, and we were like, that's so good.
You know what though? Because actually, I just want to say to you boys, like, I saw what you did that when you first put that podcast up. I was like, that is awesome. And actually, I was a bit like, I wish kind of rugby had done that, because actually, like, there is a stigma surrounding, like, blokes, especially football and rugby, like, massively. Like, of course, like, but frisbee's a sick sport. Like, love a frisbee, but it's not quite rugby, football. And, like, we're meant to be the best clubs in the uni. I think that's fairly like
we're useless, mate. We're so bad at football.
No, but I think my point
it invites people in. It invites people in, doesn't it? It's like watching the podcast last week. Like, I've never met any of you boys. Like, I knew of. Well, I say I've never met. I met like Kimmins and I know Alex and other people, but it makes it seem like, oh, he's just a bunch of blokes. Like, you don't think, oh, he's a knobhead, he plays football. It's just like he's just another bloke. Like, if we all bumped into each other in a nightclub, 10 pints deep, it might not have been the same. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
100%. And also, like, that's kind of what I was saying earlier about, like, putting us all on the same team again, because actually, like, there is that stupid stigma about, like, football, rugby, but actually, like, at the end of the day, when I saw you boys doing this podcast, I was like, I actually was a bit like, I hope I get involved some way. So when you reached out, I was like...
As soon as you commented on both of you, as soon as you commented, I texted Ben, I was like, right, let's get him involved. Let's get him involved. Definitely, mate. Thing is as well, going back to the football rugby kind of thing, it's all very similar kind of blokes, I feel like. All kind of like, it's just, I think a lot of the time you either go one way, you go, personally for me, well, that and the fact that I'm too scared to play rugby is the fact that, like, I'm from like just north of Birmingham, so rugby's not really a thing. Well, it is a thing, but, like, no one plays rugby, everyone plays football. So that's just literally because of that, I just go down that route. Whereas it could have gone the other way if I was a little bit braver. Could have gone the other way. So do you know what I mean? It's kind of.
We stand next to each other in the SU. That's what I find crazy. And there's like this mad, like, oh, that's football over there. Oh, it's rugby over there. And you're like, mate, I know a lot of, like, I live with a lad who played football. I don't think he plays anymore, but, like, you know, like, every night we go off to rugby and he'd be off in football and he'd come over to us and he'd be in the rugby corner and we'd be sort of like getting around him. And some of the boys would be like, oh, that's football boy. And I'd be like, yeah, he's a legend. I'd be like, what are we doing? I'd be like, literally, this guy is such a nice bloke. Why are we, like, stigmatizing him to be like that? So weird.
No, yeah, definitely. It's such a strange thing. I've never really understood why guys don't like each other when they don't know each other. I've just never understood this concept. Like, it doesn't make sense at all. Like, you play sport for the uni, we play sport for the uni. Surely we're all helping the uni out. Like, do you know what I mean? We're doing what we're doing. And yeah, they touched on a good topic. Just wondering how going forward now, obviously myself and Jared are here next year. Tommy here next year. George, is this your last year? What's your...
Yeah, mate, I'm off. This is my last, unfortunately.
Passing over your oddball reign, so...
yeah.
But yeah, so just sort of like, as we've seen the massive response to Movember this year, in particular, and a lot of the freshers that we had, pretty much all of them got involved. So I feel like slowly but surely, each sort of generation is slowly getting more and more reducing the stigma like that. I was wondering what you guys think would be a good way to sort of reduce the whole football rugby divide, and how we sort of make everyone sort of get on a bit more like, you know, us forwarders are today.
Yeah.
I think you have to understand that with most issues, like, things aren't going to solve overnight. Like, you're still going to have lads who die hard rugby boys, like, love kissing each other and drinking each other's pints and piss and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? You're going to have that, but like with time, I think, like the freshers now, if you can start to do stuff maybe with other lads, or do like a tournament against the rugby lads, or like mix it up or stuff like that, it could get people to know different people, and then 2-3 years down the line, when the fresh is the chairman, they'll be mates with the rugby chairman. They can do stuff like that, and then it sort of goes from there. It all starts with, it just takes one relationship to form for hundreds of relationships to form. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Makes no sense either as well, because surely coming to uni, I think we all think back to when we were freshers, the one thing you want to do is make mates, and the best way to do that is through sport. If there's more blokes that you can make friends with, as a fresher, literally ideal. No reason why it shouldn't happen.
100%. And actually, I think that's kind of telling, like with Outsport this year. I genuinely, I remember there was one part, I don't know if any of you saw it, I like sort of lost the plot a little bit, because I was thinking about these freshers not meeting each other and being locked in their houses, and I like actually sat in my room, like almost going out of my mind. My little brother's up at uni, and he's a fresher, and like it's just one of those ones. I was like, you felt like, you know how you can always do something about something. Like if there's an obstacle in your way, if you put your mind to it, you can solve it. But with this, there's nothing you can do to help these guys. And I like put something on overheard or something, and just was like, trying to vent my frustration. I think it just goes to show, hopefully, with this like break-in, almost the only positive I can see out of it is with this break-in like play for a bit, hopefully it will reset that idea that football hate rugby. Like who's going to be there to tell them that rugby hate football? Like they hopefully should just like be like, oh, there's a sound guy, and then hopefully like also I feel like if we all just keep this thing going about how like we're all blokes on the same team, we all go to Cardiff Uni, let's not continue to break it down to rugby football. Like obviously it's nice to have rugby football, but when we go out on game day, I'd love to come back to the SU one day, look to my left, see the rugby football boys, be able to go over and say, boys, how'd you go? We got up. Brilliant. Like we got up too. And it's like Cardiff Uni won. Do you know what I mean? Not like, I hope football lose. I don't hope you lose. Like, I hope you win, to be honest.
To be fair, I will say, like varsity day and stuff like that. Well, we've had one varsity, unfortunately, because of COVID, but I'll never forget coming to rugby, and I loved it. I had no idea what was going on. I don't understand the rules in any way, shape or form, but the atmosphere and everything, I actually loved it, and I was so behind it. So
yeah.
I'm all
mate, that's it though, isn't it? And actually that's the day that almost we need to try and bottle that emotion. We need like, and just be like, we're red. Do you know what I mean? We hate Swansea, but that's almost a problem as well, isn't it? We hate Swansea. Oh my god,
no, it's true.
What do you reckon? Out of interest, what would you suggest?
Yeah, this is something I've thought about since becoming the president of football. Sort of was really sort of wondering how we can sort of get the boys all together, because it just seemed silly. Like our club was 120 last year. The AU reduced, well, first thing, scrapped the whole club, so there was no football club until October. And then luckily we're allowed to have about 50, 60 boys at the moment. And obviously we were having a lot of problems when there was 120 boys, because nobody was sort of adhering to any sort of social conformity sort of thing. Just not pinning it on anyone, but there were boys that were literally just going out just to cause trouble because they were wearing a football tie. So I've really been trying to think about how I can sort of reduce this stigma of like football boys, aren't nice and they just cause trouble, because I know every member in the club and I know everyone's a good lad. Like nobody's out there to sort of hurt anyone. I think it really would be sort of like, more male mixed socials. feel like a lot of socials are like boy girl because everyone's thinking, oh, like, they're the single lads and the single girls, like that'll be funny, and they'll all get on and whatever, and the older boys will have a good laugh out of it. But I think mixing male socials really is like an underrated and not really touched on sort of social idea. So
yeah,
I think
it'd be interesting what a dynamic that would be like, because actually I'd love to see it happen. I think it would be really interesting, but like it would be one of those ones that would need some planning. That's for sure.
It'd take half an hour of really awkward vibes at the start, and then eventually, and then
it would be like, where do you do it? Like, whose turf do you do it on? Like, what would you go to neutral grounds? Do you know what I mean?
Hey, to be fair though, we're talking about this. It's going to be a while before that can happen. But with everything going on, but it's true. Well, eventually, probably when COVID goes away in about 20 years, it will hopefully. Yeah. We'll come back. Our sons or daughters will be playing in the uni teams. Probably by 11.
Sort of just to sort of reply to that idea of like, how do you stop the dickheads almost? Like, I think there's that level of accountability, and where like when I was social sec in rugby, obviously I've got to hold myself to a standard which I dropped off on like numerous occasions. But I feel like the standard that I was usually trying to hold people to was being a good bloke. Like, I think we all agree, like, we all do stuff that's stupid sometimes, like naughty stuff, you know what I mean? Stuff you're getting away with, but when it comes to being if you catch someone acting like an arsehole, to put it like simply, or like in the SU, and you're just like, hey mate, we don't stand for that. Or like if we're in our clubhouse and someone's breaking the clubhouse on purpose, which, you're thinking, look, why are you doing that? And actually saying,
grow up, isn't it? It's grow up. It's like whenever you go out and people try and start on you, like you're just like, mate, grow up. Like no one's here for that. Like no one cares. You just think, if you punch me, no one's going to give a shit. No, you're not going to gain anything. I'm not going to gain anything. Like it's definitely one of them things. I think it starts at the top as well, and like there's got to be like a respect thing as well, because some people will come into clubs, and I've been in clubs before, like rugby clubs, where people think they're above everyone else. It's like, hold on, mate, you've done. You've got no respect you've got no right to do that. You've got to sort of understand that these people above you, like they are influential, and you should respect them, and you should respect the clubs that you play for, because they're prestigious clubs. You know what I mean? Well, you say you should, but you're prestigious clubs. You know what I mean? It's about respecting the club as well as each other.
That's where I think that you guys are already setting an incredible precedent, because you're literally, as leaders of your club, doing this. And I think with that respect, like you just spoke about, like I just sort of mentioned earlier about breaking that chain, let's not avoid the topic, like initiations happen, and like that kind of idea that always happened because we got treated like that, so we're going to treat you like that. Hopefully we can like break that. Like genuinely, I've never been so happy in my whole life when the end of our year got cancelled, because obviously there's a sort of expectation to go ahead and initiate people. But there's also that level of like, that's almost now, it is almost in the past. Like, I know it's like great to keep these traditions running, but if we want to move forward and we want to progress, like we're talking about, we want to start thinking about people's mental health. We need to start thinking about that kind of stuff. And I think that actually arguably now piles onto this whole idea with like what women are saying at the moment about how it's all gone under the carpet, and now we need to hold each other to account. They're saying on there, like, well, we're all saying now, hang on, if you like catcall someone out of a window of a car, because I've seen it happen. I've never done it myself, and I'd like never been inclined to. But if I see a boy now doing that, I almost am like backed by society, and we're all now on this level where if you catcall someone or I see you doing that, I'm going to call you out. And I feel like that's like hopefully where everyone's moving.
I think you can link it to like the lad culture that's with university sport as a whole, and like that sort of blends off as well to the way men act with women as well, like just the lads environment. Oh, he's been a lad. And I think that it works with the mental health side of it as well, because when you're in a group of everyone's strong men and lads and everyone's loving it and having a great time, you might not be having a great time, but you think, oh well, if I'm being a Sappuccino, do you know what I mean, no one's going to want to be around me. But I think it only takes one person, or as I said, one respected person, or just anyone in the club who, like, say you're on a match day or after a game, just to stand up and be like, actually, mate, I feel like a minute, or or you stand up to one of your friends who's done something wrong, and it just takes one person to do that, and then there's a domino effect from it. Like whoever's the club captain, if they were to stand up to say to the lads in the first team, like, boys, I've been struggling mentally, I guarantee you, some of the other boys who feel like or have been struggling would be like, actually, mate, so have I. And you can begin to talk, and it helps to break down these problems that we have.
Don, can I ask you a question based on that? Obviously, we were talking before. You were saying about how you used to play academy rugby and you didn't play rugby at uni. What was the reason behind that?
Part of it was like the lad culture. Like, I was never one of the boys. Like, I was never really a rugby boy. Like, I used to love playing the rugby and playing at a high standard, but I wasn't really like a lads. Like, I'd go and have a laugh and then play hard when I had to, and I didn't really want to do like, I think every Wednesday I had to go and drink 15 pints or whatever, and then go to the SU and then just be like, oh. Yeah. And I didn't really want to do that, or I just felt like it wasn't really me, and I didn't want to play because, like, I was sort of falling out of love with the game. And then there was a side of it where you play with people who just think they're sick, and it's like, come on, mate, like, just you're not in the real world.
As part of that's a perfect example of. I feel like you are a perfect example of everything we're trying to do within the football club, and everything George is clearly trying to do within the rugby club as well. Because you're a bloke who's played academy rugby for however long, clearly would have been more than good enough to be in a majority of the men's rugby teams at Cardiff, but you haven't played because of that. You're like, oh, I don't know if I want to get involved in that. That's exactly the thing that's been happening in sports clubs across universities for the last however long. If you don't have that kind of lad mentality or something like that, especially in men's clubs, and then you just go, oh, I don't really want to get involved in something like that, despite the fact you're good enough to play sport at that level. And that's just something we need to address, really. And I feel like we hopefully are. So
hopefully, you know what, you've hit that nail on the head, because I think I don't know how it happens. Like, why does it happen that people think it's like, if there's someone that comes in the club and they're good enough to play rugby, why on earth would we not welcome that with open arms? And it is something that I was always very conscious of when I was social sec, and something that's quite hard to fight against, because, and not to say anyone, like, I don't even think there's an individual that was sitting there and would disagree with what we're saying right now, but it's that like mob mentality that's how it happens. And I think it also, it just massively comes back to this idea that hopefully it will break the chain, and like this will stop happening, because we got a crazy opportunity. I'm actually buzzing for you boys that you're in charge and you're here for another year, because you actually obviously really like mean well and want that to happen, which is so exciting for you.
Fingers crossed. I've got my interview next week for my masters, so fingers crossed I'm here next year. You keep going, yeah, Joe will be here next year. I'm like, oh Christ, I'm getting my masters now. Everyone's going to know I've failed.
No, but George, going on from that, like, the mob mentality of it, like, I was 18 when I joined uni or whatever. You join 18, 19. When you go to a social and everyone's going, you fresher. Someone said that to me, I'd be like, mate, like, don't talk to me like that. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, there's the thing around freshers, like, you just get treated like, and it's like, hold on, I'm as much of a bloke as you are. Like, I'm not here for this. I just want to have a couple of beers and then go and get weird in the nightclub. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not here to be like spat on or have my drink thrown on me. It's like, grow up, mate. I don't want this. No one wants this.
I think it comes back down to, you know how you were sort of saying earlier about how the blokes come in and they think they're all that, and then it's kind of like, hang on, there's a level of respect there. I think it just needs to be reciprocated on all levels, because with that being said, you can't just be an older boy who has earned respect and then treat someone like that. So I think that sort of level of like reciprocation, I feel like it's kind of come out of schools. Like, obviously, like, I mean, I went to a private school, and like, by the time I'd left that school, there was no hierarchy left, because everyone just sort of was a bit fed up with it. You're right, bro. Sorry, mate.
It's big fish. It's big fish, isn't it? Big fish in a small pond, and then you get thrown into such a massive pond. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's like, oh, you sort of feel like you have to, like, you might have been the big dog at your school, and then you come into a uni club and you're a minor. Do you know what I mean? And it's like they're trying to earn it, and everyone's sort of.
I think what you lose is like why you're there, and it's suddenly like this new thing. Because I was shocked when I walked into my first social. So I mean, it's just one of those ones. It changes your whole perception of rugby. So hopefully there's going to be good change though. And actually, I will say I'll say on behalf of the rugby boys, we have made massive strides since I joined the club. Massive. Like, I'm not going to sit and be like, oh, like blow smoke on my own ass, but like me and my mate Woof, who were social techs last year, were sort of holding people to account and saying, you're not going to get away with that. You're not just going to blast a hole in our clubhouse and get away with it. You're going to go and fix that yourself. And that is what happened on a couple of occasions. And we're pretty proud of that. So hopefully moving forward, that's going to be the case. So
fair play to you.
Yeah, definitely. I think it is just that sort of accountability, and then that being kept from year to year. So me and Jared have tried to sort of make, well, I'd say we have made the club performance-based rather than social-based. Right now, obviously, we have no social aspect, but there's not really going to be one until we're at a playing level where we're happy with. And sort of we've got like a club ethos, and now we want boys to be in place with playing-wise. Then sort of the social side's a reward, rather than when I was here last year, playing-wise, I didn't even want to play anymore by the end because everyone was more worried about the social on the Wednesday night. You know, boys were forgetting the balls and the bibs and the cones because they remembered their bottle of wine and dragon soup. Like it just didn't make sense to me that that's what boys were looking forward to, and we'd lose the game and everyone's like, fine. I was fuming. I don't like losing football games. I'm here to play. I don't want to lose. Like I don't really.
Have you thought about, like, you know, you said you wanted to sort of bring it through. Have you thought about like talking to the freshers now, or when you're in the third year, the second years, and the freshers, sort of trying to find characters that will progress the ethos all the way through, so when you guys leave, it won't just vanish?
Yeah.
Have you thought about finding like a mentoring not a mentor scheme, but just trying to make sure you have strong leaders throughout every single age group of the team?
Such a good question, that.
Yeah. That's a great point. That was, we were sort of going to ask on your advice and sort of how we go forward. So we're both here next year. We'll probably stay in our roles. So we'll be able to like infiltrate another year. We're thinking of bringing a current fresher now and bringing him onto sort of like the president sort of committee with us as like a 3. So then when we leave, he takes over like that. But I think what's key for us this year, Jared, is that we do have quite a few boys who are sort of on board with us. Do you know what I mean? It's not just us two sort of having to set this down to the whole club. It is about 6 or 7 of us.
Mate, even for this podcast, like the only reason George has got involved is because Matt Kimmins, the social media sec, was like getting involved in that. Do you know what I mean? Not behind the scenes, but in the committee group chat every single day there'll be stuff in it when they're out. Every single day there'll be different things, what we're doing, what we're getting involved in, and every boy who's not even just on the committee this year, the runs, for example, the last 3 weeks we've been running probably just under 20 kilometers a week, like just as part of a pre-season. And you try to do that previous years, no one's doing it realistically. No one's doing it. I mean, I'm doing the 10k yesterday. I didn't really
10k yesterday.
Really didn't want to do it, but it's kind of, everyone knows the standards now, and we are all doing it, which means that everyone has kind of, it's just the way it is. That's the culture now. Is we've got to be fit. We've got to be to play football, because that's the main. That's the thing we all got involved in the club for, really.
And no one likes playing for a team as well, because it's not fun to lose.
Exactly.
It's great you have a social, but when you've lost and you go to a social, it's like, when you've won, it's have it, boys. It's more enjoyable, because it's not like, oh, we should have won today, or oh, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? It's like, all right, boys, we won. Let's enjoy this.
You know, just to sort of add on to that, we last year, it said on the sort of note I got before was, it said one of the things you were going to ask was the best moment I've ever had at the club, and not to like jump the gun, but just it's sort of quite relevant, is we took on our first away day, so like me and my mate Wolf's first day of social set, we took 120 boys on a bus, 2 buses down to Hartbury away. Hartbury, the best side of comp. We go down there. Our boys were so up for it. We were all going out for it. We beat them in their own backyard, come back to our social, best social we've ever had in our life. Like the vibe was just incredible. Everything was just perfect. And then we won the next game, and then we lost every single game for the rest of the season. And I swear to God, I've never seen them dip in just morale in my whole life, going and getting around the boys, because we loved it. We were like, and then just losing every week and just being like sad and listening to captain's report, and it's always just like, we'll get them next week, and you're like, I
mean, it makes such a difference when you lose. You'll be like 1-2 MDSU. someone's having a conversation, you're like, oh, do you think I could have done that pass better?
Yeah.
Hey, like, don't talk to me about that now. I'm like, no, I'll talk about that tomorrow. Like, let's enjoy ourselves. Nah, mate, I lost it for the team. I'm like, oh god, like, so I just, some sort of weird thing.
You do get those badges though, don't you? You get those blokes that just love football.
Honestly, right. First year, I was just about to come on to that. That was literally me in first year. Theo Savini was my captain in first year for the threes, and I never actually top bloke. Hopefully, we'll get him on at some point on the podcast. But every single Wednesday, I wasn't playing. That was I was a centre midfielder at that point before I got slow and old. There was a few very, very good centre midfielders in that team. There was no way I was in the squad every week, but I was coming off the bench probably about 86 minutes every week and getting on for 4 minutes and then going and drinking on the bus on the way home. And every single week, I'd be in his ear every single Wednesday about 2:30 going, Theo, what do I need to do to get in the team? What do I need to do? You're on about those blokes that were the bad. That was amazing. Honestly, if he listens to this, he'll be like, yeah, that's so true.
Like that, you've seen the meme of the guy just gnawing that girl's ear off in the club. And
that was me. I think back to that now. I'm like, poor guy. Jeez.
Oh, it's so funny.
Man United just scored, by the way, lads. Can't say to Milan. Anyone cares?
I tell you, do you know what? Actually, here's an idea for you. In terms of relations between rugby football, the other day we got a text from like Earth Football or someone, and they were like, "Listen, we want a fixture. Do you fancy putting a team out?" And we fielded a team full of freshers, and then like me and a couple of other blokes my year. And we beat them, and like it was like the best day we've ever had. We I couldn't believe it. We started the game, and we were like 10 minutes in. I said to the guy, "Oh, when's half time?" He said, "Mate, we're playing 90 minutes." And I was like, "Are you mad? We're playing 90 minutes? I'm literally out of nick." But we played this sick game of football. We had a penalty shootout at the end for a laugh, and like I'll tell you what you could do is like, I feel like obviously we probably I don't think the football boys would want to play rugby, but if you organised a couple fixtures, that rugby boys would come to football. I think they get around it so hard. We play your like lower teams.
Yeah.
That's where you get a good little bit.
That's Ben, I was just like laughing, thinking about trying to get some of our boys to play rugby.
I'm taking a coaching role.
I'm not playing. I'll do the line.
Get Kimmins in the rugby team.
Oh my god,
it's a great idea though, George. Great idea, mate.
Yeah, you could watch, because like socials on a Wednesday. There's some sort of sport on a Wednesday. There's some football on a Wednesday night. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm sure some of the rugby lads, are football fans as well. Just watch the footy together. Do you know what I mean? Or watch the rugby on a Saturday or something. Like, I mean, that's a bit different, but just watch the sport together, because you can just have a couple of beers. Then it's not so much of we want to do this as a social. You just go, boys, football's on. Let's just enjoy it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
No, definitely. Cool. So just wrapping up, just first thing, thank you both, George and Tom, for coming on here. We really appreciate it. It's been a really enjoyable podcast. And just wanted sort of just a final couple of words from Jared, Tom and George, just sort of about what you think, what's important going to take from this podcast and going forward for sort of men and their mental health. George, shall I start with you?
Yeah, I'll start. Yeah. Well, I think first and foremost, like that idea of like setting a precedent. I think what you guys have started, I'm really glad I was involved, and like just saying this is the way I think we should be going, and then like having that level of respect going both ways, and then we're all on the same team. Do you know what I mean? So I just think that was a big takeaway for me. And then the other thing was check your balls, and then the other thing was rugby versus football. Let's do that.
Yeah,
for sure.
Freshers Week. I can just see it on my head. Freshers Week next year. Rugby v football. Fingers crossed. Everything's sorted by then. Big crowd, unbelievable scenes. Absolutely.
Barbecue, mixed social after. Oh, that'd be great. Yeah. Start the year off on the right foot, wouldn't it? Yeah, like that. Tom, just going forward, just sort of, are you going to be the face of Movember this coming up here? Do you know that yet?
I don't know. I might be on placement, hopefully. But if I'm not, I still don't know if I'll do it, but I'll definitely be involved with the campaign again, because it was stressful. But I will be involved. And then one thing I would say from this podcast is sort of take responsibility out of the hands of the people who are suffering, because it's very easy to say to people, and I've done the same before, like, oh, I'm here if you need to talk to me, or I'm here to listen to anyone. But like, Jared, one of your mates isn't going to think, oh, I'm going to message Tom Matthews on 9 p.m. on a Thursday. Like, he's not going to give a fuck about talking to me. It's about taking it out of their hands, and us as lads being more active to check up on other people and just ask twice. And because it is so easy to fall into the trap of, I'm here if you need to talk to me, I've done my job. It's about actively going talking to people and trying to keep the conversations up that the moustache creates.
Definitely. Thank you both. And Jared, just any last words before we call it a day?
I've got nothing to add, but like, thank you so much to both of you. But also fair, but thank you for everything you've been doing for blokes in general. The whole point of this was to try and get men to start talking, well, not just like boys, especially at uni, really, to start talking about their mental health and taking it a bit more seriously. And both of you are perfect examples of that. So fair play to you both, and well done to you both.
No, I appreciate us having us on, boys. And like, I'm looking forward to. I haven't actually listened to any of the podcasts yet, which is criminal. So I'm gonna have to go and catch up on them. Looking forward to it.
I tell you what, I'm looking forward to the next one. We're definitely gonna have to have you back at some point.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, mate. Well, I'll bring a couple of beers next time. Literally thought, like, bring some water.
I saw that. I saw the San Pellegrino. Sam Pellegrino.
Mate, it's my mum's bottle. I bought it from home. Don't at me.
Right. Thank you very much, boys. Cheers. We'll see you all soon. Cheers.
I really appreciate it.